Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Echoes of War. I'm Craig from the Pacific War Channel, and you all know him, Gareth, my co-host. How are you?
Hey Craig, great to be on here. And I think today is gonna be a really good episode and talking definitely about one of your most favorite people of all time.
Yeah, there's gonna be a lot of people here being like, "Wow, this is the fourth time you've had an episode dedicated to almost the same subject." But yes, this is gonna be a unique episode. But before we jump into it, before I even say what this episode's about, just want to say, if you have a chance, please check us out on YouTube. We're actually adopting a brand new software, so it doesn't look so dog shit because the quality was lacking for both audio and video. It should be improved. Over on YouTube, you're going to notice we have full map layouts, pictures. We will have clips soon. I'll figure out a way to incorporate that so we can have like some live reaction videos and such, as well as we have a full clips channel. So if you want to go, please support it. It's very hard to have a brand new channel on YouTube. It's Echoes of War Clips channel, and it has 10-minute segments of various episodes. It has YouTube shorts, and it's a lot of fun. And I think it really shows off our
It's
product to those not willing to listen to a 2-hour podcast.
true enough, it covers pretty detailed and specific events. And I think
Yeah,
it's a really good listen if you just want to, for example, Operation Husky. If you just want to know about Operation Mincemeat, we just have about 8 9
yeah,
minute segment.
exactly. And also, of course, if you'd like to further support this channel, the best way to do so is to basically like, subscribe, and comment on the YouTube channel mostly and tell friends about it. But if you want to go even above and beyond all of that, please consider checking out the YouTube membership or the Patreon account. Both are identical in pricing and what you get. And what you do get is access to the exclusive podcast series. It's 28 episodes and ongoing. I just released the latest episode, which is the complete history of the USS Hornet CV-12. And aside from that, you get early
Well,
access to
not
all the
my
content they
biggie.
make. It's not Big E, but I think it's second to Big E in terms of like a
Uh,
lot
I
of
guess for
service.
I guess for me, I'm just saying it because I kept pestering you for the Biggie
Yeah.
podcast.
That was a two-parter as well. As well as this one.
Yeah.
I had to do the USS Hornet CV-8 because obviously it gets sunk halfway through the war, and then I did the CV-12, who I actually interviewed a guy who served aboard it, so I have a lot of
Oh
background
wow.
information on that. So very interesting, very cool guy. My God, I did an interview with him. God, a year or two ago. I think he was 84 years old. Really great interview. He fascinating stuff. But yeah, and of course you get all sorts of other goodies if you join up. There's a lot of polls that go up. Also, want to acknowledge that Gareth has been running a lot of polls on the Pacific War Channel. So if you guys want to have more input, please go check that out because I think we're daily trying to just throw more and more out there because we want to grow Echoes of War. It's doing great on the audio podcast platforms like Spotify and everything because it's been around for quite a bit, at this point. But it's really grueling. I'll admit this to have on my YouTube channel, which is specifically these historic videos that will pull in quite big numbers now, but the podcast not so much because there's two completely different audiences when you think about it. But I would really like to see Echoes of War grow on YouTube. But
And people, if you like see that post, we'd really like to hear your thoughts on the
yeah,
various polls, the subjects, and we will reply to it. So just keep the engagement coming.
yeah, of course. But stating all of that, and for you audio listeners, you're not going to get to see this, but our subject today is going to be it's not necessarily on an individual, but kind of is. This beautiful man right here, General Douglas MacArthur. So this is going to technically be the first episode in a multi-part series. I do not know how long it'll be because I think we did a good job with the Malaya campaign series. We thoroughly
Yeah.
did it. I think a lot of people actually commented things on the YouTube version, like they didn't realize how in depth it actually was, because everyone is kind of like, oh, Yamashita went through Malaya, and then there's the Battle of Singapore. That's pretty much everybody knoes that, and no one really looks at the smaller
Yeah, I think we
battles.
just forget, most people and common history tends to forget the 800-mile dash
Yeah,
across the peninsula.
exactly. But this episode is going to be the first episode in the Japanese invasion of the Philippines. So 1941, 1942. We're not going to be talking about the liberation at some point. I'm sure much later on we will talk about, 45 and all that. But it involves a certain individual named General Douglas MacArthur. And I thought it would be better, instead of getting directly into the invasion, I wanted to highlight something that's kind of secondary to that. And people are gonna be like, "Oh my god, he's telling the same story again." But it's how Douglas MacArthur really screwed up the defense of the Philippines. But I'm adding more information this time. It's not the same rundown that I did once upon a time with some of my friends while I was drinking. And we're going to be looking at two key concepts here: War Plan Orange, how it wasn't implemented properly, and the Clark Field disaster. That kind of summarizes all this. But this is also going to be a bit of a bio on Douglas MacArthur because I will admit I shit on him a lot. And he was a courageous guy. He did a lot. He had an extensive career, did a lot of heroic acts, and I don't want to discredit his service or anything. He made horrendous mistakes, I would say, but he was still a unique individual. And
It's I remember when we covered him in like when we did that generals ranking video.
yeah,
We definitely put him in the overrated segment of the United States generals in the Pacific,
yeah,
and we gave actually Walter Kruger the best. And again, overrated does not mean they were incompetent. It just means they were not as good. We do not feel they were as good as they claim to be.
exactly. Yes.
Like, for example, a certain British Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery.
Oh, I interviewed for the Battle of Mactilla, well, for the guy's book, Thunder Run, which is based off the Battle of Mactilla, Mr. Boucher, and he actually had a lot to say about how he doesn't think he's underrated, and he's got. I think most British people are like, stop going after Monty, and I'm like, I get it, because Monty, it's kind of a meme to go after him today, but yeah, it was a lot of fun. Let's jump into it before this becomes a 2 hour one and people start screaming at me. But we're gonna start off with a little story about Dougie. So Douglas MacArthur. He was born January the 26th of 1880 at Little Rock Barracks in Little Rock, Arkansas. Arkansas. Wow, I'm totally Canadian. I said that wrong. And he was born to Arthur MacArthur Jr. This family, and his wife, Pinckney Hardy MacArthur. Pinckney, man, that's a hell of a name. So Arthur and Pinckney had three sons. Douglas being the youngest, followed by Arthur III, born 1876, and Malcolm, born 1878. Must have sucked to be Malcolm, not part of this MacArthur chain name going on here. The family lived on succession of army posts in the American Old West, where Douglas reportedly, and this is a quote from him from his biography that he self-wrote, learned to ride and shoot even before I could read or write. Indeed, almost before I could walk and talk. Of course. Of course he'd write that. MacArthur attended Forest Public School and then in 1893, the West Texas Military Academy, where he was awarded the gold medal for scholarship and deportment. He played for the school tennis team, quarterback on the football team, shortstop for the baseball team. He was named valedictorian, and he finished with an average of 97.33 on 100. No one
Oh,
can
that's
say
pretty
he was an
impressive.
idiot. No, he was good in school.
Very impressive.
Yeah.
And not to mention quarterback, so okay, should I just say Tom Brady's predecessors?
Yeah. MacArthur would enter West Point Academy, very prestigious, of course, on June the 13th of 1899, where he was hazed alongside his fellow classmate, Ulysses S. Grant III. Yeah, another famous individual, the son of a famous individual. MacArthur rose through the ranks of, corporal to first sergeant to first captain by his final year. He would graduate in a 93-man class on June the 11th of 1903, commissioned as a second lieutenant in the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Now, his mother has to come into this subject, as everyone knows. A lot of historians argue MacArthur, he had a helicopter mom. I don't think anyone would not argue that. And a lot have pointed out that much of his early accomplishments were not solely a result of his merit, but perhaps his mom pushing things along, we'll say. She did play quite a pivotal role in his career. She was a formidable figure, and she would accompany him to every military station he would go to. I mean, he lived with his mom most of his life, and she certainly used her influence as the wife of, commanding General Arthur MacArthur to ensure that her son received beneficial postings that would facilitate his advancement. This, is known as being a helicopter parent, basically. And she paid extreme attention to Dougie's experiences and problems, and she would always intervene on his behalf. Now, when he joined the 3rd Engineer Battalion of the Department of the Pacific, where his father was, Uh, I think he was acting as a major general at the time. They would depart for the Philippines in October of 1903, where he would be supervising the construction of a wharf at Camp Josman. MacArthur would serve as his father's aide de camp on a Tokyo appointment, which is very interesting given what happens later in history, where he inspected the Japanese military bases at Nagasaki, Kobe, and Kyoto in 1905. And this is very interesting as, this is the time period when the Russo-Japanese War is going on. He would get
You
his
mean
first
where the Second Pacific Squadron was getting absolutely licked?
Yep. He would get his first command, Company K, 3rd Engineer Battalion, at Fort Leavenworth in 1908, and he'd get a promotion to captain by 1911. Now, on April the 21st of 1914, President Woodrow Wilson ordered the occupation of Veracruz, where MacArthur joined the headquarters staff, and he would be nominated for a Medal of Honor conducting a bunch of reconnaissance missions. And I will point out this is where he did show a lot of bravery. MacArthur returned to the War Department, and he was promoted to major on December the 11th of 1915. I actually didn't put this in my notes, but MacArthur, when he was doing this Veracruz thing, he was a bit of a cowboy. He did get into some gunfights on these reconnaissance missions, and he definitely did prove some merit. And he showed himself to be cool under pressure. And I'll say this again, in World War I, he was notably a very brave man. So he gets a promotion to major December 11th, 1915. When America declares war on Germany on April the 6th of 1917, MacArthur and Newton D. Baker secured an agreement from then President Wilson, one of the worst presidents the United States has ever had, to use the National Guard on the Western Front, leading to the creation of the 42nd Rainbow Division, which MacArthur, as its chief of staff, was ranked as a colonel. The 42nd Division saw some action in the Champagne-Marne offensive, where MacArthur was decorated with the Croix de Guerre by Major General Georges de Balazar, and the Silver Star Medal by Menrehel, and the Distinguished Service Cross. MacArthur was promoted to Brigadier General on June the 26th, and he would see some further action at the Battle of Saint-Mihiel and the Meuse-Argonne offensive. He was awarded a second Distinguished Service Cross, and by the end of the war, he was awarded the Distinguished Service Medal and about 7 Silver Stars. So lest it be said, MacArthur was not a coward, because people poked at him later in World War II for cowardice, and I think that's very unfair. And I will get into that when we do cover things that happen on Corregidor, because that's one thing that you can't really go after him for. He wasn't a coward. Now, after the Great War, MacArthur became the superintendent of the U.S. Military Academy at West Point, where he spent a lot of time reforming there. Instead of the traditional summer camp at Fort Clinton, MacArthur had the cadets trained to use modern weapons by regular Army sergeants at Fort Dix, having them march back to West Point with full packs on. He replaced the study of campaigns, during the Civil War to those of World War I, because obviously it's brand new material. They've probably been looking at the Civil War stuff for a long time by that point. And there was a lot of things, he brought some unique changes, but I mean, also it's kind of a product of its time. MacArthur married multimillionaire heiress Louise Cromwell Brooks in Palm Beach, Florida. This is a scandalous story, by the way. On February the 14th of 1922, and on October of that same year, they would sail for the Philippines with her 2 children, Walter and Louise, where MacArthur would assume command of the military district of Manila. In June of 1923, MacArthur assumed command of the 23rd Infantry Brigade of the Philippine Division. So you can see here that MacArthur has an extensive career going back to his father's experiences in the Philippines and in Southeast Asia, for that matter.
It's quite a connection.
Yeah, it's in his blood. He does have a connection, particularly to the Philippines, but he has a lot of knowledge of the Asia Pacific, which makes him unique for what happens later on. In June of 1923, MacArthur assumed command, like I said, of the 23rd Infantry Brigade of the Philippine Division. The next year, he helped quell the Philippine Scout Mutiny, and he received another promotion to become the youngest Major General in the U.S. Army at that time. 1927, MacArthur and Louise separated because
I think just wanted to say one thing. For peacetime armies, just getting even a promotion
it's crazy.
to like star ranks was crazy. I mean, if you even look at it, like if I just compare Sir Archibald Wavell in the British Army, very distinguished career, but he had to remain a colonel for most of the interwar period, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, started getting like the general rank in just a few years before World War II began.
Not to besmirch the United States military, but during the interwar period, Britain was more professional, and Britain maintained, like you said, I don't want to call it like a meritocracy, but you can tell with MacArthur, he's kind of being groomed a little bit, and his mom has a lot to play in it too, of course. And they're kind of promoting him up as like a figurehead, almost. I find at this point, and yeah, it's not totally merit based. We'll say that much. But he then assumes command of the Philippine department. By 1930, MacArthur was 50 years old and still the youngest and best known U.S. Major generals at the time. He would leave the Philippines command for to go back to San Francisco. And on November the 21st, 1930, he was sworn in as a chief of staff of the U.S. Army with the rank of full general, which again is impressive, not being during World War time. While in Washington, he was known to be quite a character, and here we're gonna shit on him a little bit. There are reports that he liked to go around wearing a Japanese kimono in his office, and he would cool himself with an oriental fan while smoking cigarettes from a jeweled cigarette holder. He also, I don't remember the exact year when this began, but he began hiring public relations staff to promote his image with the American public, trying to showcase, his beliefs or what he wants people to think his beliefs are. Because MacArthur definitely had political ambitions. And I think anyone who knows the story, what happens later after the Korean War and stuff, you know where this is going. He wanted to portray himself as a strongman that America needed. And he, like most at this time, wanted to present himself as being adamantly anti-communist. He believed that America's destiny was in the Asia Pacific, which everyone, I would say, in America at this point believed. There's a lot of strong interests in the Asia Pacific. And like most Americans in the military prior to World War II, he had a hostility to Britain and the British Empire, which goes without saying, for the Americans. One contemporary described MacArthur as the greatest actor to ever serve in the U.S. Army. While another wrote
That's quite a comment.
While another wrote that he had a court rather than a staff, and that one comes from Eisenhower, by the way. I know that quote.
So future president and equal pair in military ranks comment.
Yeah,
right? Like,
isn't that interesting?
If you look, if I just say equal because of the fact that both did get promoted to 5-star general from that angle.
Yeah, but Eisenhower did get the presidency where MacArthur did not, and I think that has a lot to do with the debacle in Korea. Here's something that really besmirched his career. MacArthur did a controversial act in 1932 during what was known as the bonus army situation. And this is where veterans of World War I were converging on Washington to demand early cash redemption of their service certificates. Excuse me. To just brutally summarize, they were promised, we'll call it bonuses. And the United States, it's not as if they weren't handing them out. They were just very slow to do so, and we were hitting the Great Depression, in 1929.
Oh, it's already in peak season.
Yeah, exactly. So they wanted to take out some of this money to help them and their families, and Washington was reluctant. So MacArthur finds himself in a position where he has to deal with what looks like, I guess you could say, a threat to Washington. Not really. I mean, a lot of these people, they had tents surrounding, the premise, and they were feeding each other. And it was I'm going to call it a peaceful protest. And that's a heated subject today. But back then, I could say most people would agree. So MacArthur, he decided he was going to do something rather bold. He was concerned that communists, this is his words, that communists were taking over the movement. And that, he went to Herbert Hoover at the time, who was president of the United States. And he's like, I want to surround the affected area and clear it out without delay. So MacArthur brought up some troops with tanks and actually
I can see that's how it's going.
Yeah, so against the advice of Major Dwight D. Eisenhower at the time, he brought this force up to try and disperse the group of peaceful protesters, I'll call it. And in a few hours, they cleared the bonus army's campgrounds using tear gas, which accidentally started some fires, killing a few people. And it was a public relations disaster. And guess what? There was another famous guy here who was leading those tanks, and he didn't want to do so, but it was Patton. So Patton got stuck in this too.
So I'm guessing this Patton and MacArthur never really had a harmonious relationship, or you have
Actually,
no
they
idea.
met each other once in France during World War One, and as far as I remember, Patton didn't have anything bad to say about him. Kind of liked him.
No, yeah. Though I guess we never know, right? Since they were in completely different theaters of operations, and
Yeah, I mean, they
yeah,
never professionally really worked together. Yeah.
yeah. And not to mention when you have two giant egos clashing, that's
Oh
never
my
going to
god.
go
Yeah.
down well.
I mean, they would be hilarious together. Talk about clash of tyrants. But this bonus army situation was really unpopular with the American public. It was disastrous, and it actually led to it contributed. I won't say it led to contributed to Hoover losing out, and I think
And
it
the
contributed to
presidency
Hoover looking bad too. But
for the 32 presidential elections.
yeah, I think it contributed to that. Yeah, definitely. 1934, MacArthur was extorted by a journalist named Drew Pearson over having a mistress, Isabel Rosario Cooper, who he had been with in the Philippines. And I'll say allegedly, MacArthur settled out of court, paying him about $15,000 at the time. And we'll talk about financial things with MacArthur. In 1932, Franklin Delano Roosevelt won the U.S. election, and of course, he brought in the New Deal, sweeping changes. I want to note to the audience who might not be aware, prominent Democrat, whereas MacArthur would be seen as a prominent frontrunner for the Republican Party, or coming soon to be. Maybe not at this point, but he's definitely looking. MacArthur and Roosevelt ran into some hot water many times. Roosevelt wanted to cut the Army's budget about 51%. MacArthur, started to attack him. He lectured Roosevelt apparently at the White House, saying things like, when we lose the next war, and there's like an American boy lying dead in the mud with a bayonet through his belly, or dying of other things, it's going to not be the name MacArthur that'll be blamed, but it'll be Roosevelt. So he
Damn.
said some rather big stuff. Yeah. And apparently Roosevelt yelled at him, "You must not talk to the president that way." And MacArthur offered to resign. And this is all alleged, by the way. I don't know if this is concrete information. Roosevelt refused to allow him to resign. And apparently MacArthur, he staggered out of the White House and he puked on the front steps. Again, this is all alleged information. I read this out of a biography done on MacArthur, and I will admit it seemed to be pretty biased against him. Seemed a little bit schmutty, to be honest. It's of course the
And
famous one, America
I'm pretty
Caesar.
sure like something like that would have been well documented, I guess.
Well, he is a very
Limited.
well documented person because he got so many people to write about him, and they all lied about him. So yeah,
It's kind of like
it's
biopics for Caesar and Asterix and Obelix.
it, oh my god, yeah, exactly. That's a good one. Yeah, I mean, I'm from Quebec, so like it's a staple to watch Asterix and Obelix, here, even though it's a Belgium thing. But yeah, in spite of the heated exchange, MacArthur was awarded a second Distinguished Service Medal and retroactively 2 Purple Hearts for his time during World War One. He was injured. MacArthur insisted on being the first recipient of the Purple Heart, which was engraved, of course. Now, when the Philippines achieved the semi-independent status, this is in 1935, President of the Philippines, Manuel Quezon, asked MacArthur to supervise the creation of the Philippine Army, excuse me. It should be noted, Manuel Kuzon was very good friends with MacArthur's dad, and became extremely good friends with MacArthur. Keep that in the back of your mind. Both men, would have a long-lasting friendship, I'll say this. I mean, like, you look at his father's tenure, it's like 35 years. President Roosevelt accepted MacArthur's assignment and gave him the rank of Field Marshal. Yeah, Field Marshal. It's a big one. Alongside being the military advisor to the Commonwealth government of the Philippines. Huge scratching MacArthur's back moment. But I
But
will
is
have.
Field Marshal a rank in the U.S. Army?
Eh, it's like it's more of a position. But
Yeah, because I know it's an official British rank.
it's not yeah,
U.S.
no.
not official within the U.S. Army, I think.
Yeah, it's not like the British. It's not official. But Roosevelt a large reason why he went through with this and allowed this to happen was he wanted MacArthur gone, not around Washington, because he saw him as a political threat. So MacArthur, he ends up marrying Jean Fairclough, and this is in 1937. And they have their first son, who, lo and behold, is called Arthur MacArthur the Fourth. Got to keep that name going. And on December the 31st, 1937, MacArthur officially retired from the U.S. Army so that he could take up, these new positions. And he obviously stepped away from his role as having anything to do directly with the American military. Not at all true, though. He definitely was still part of it in some way. Like, he was deeply embedded. So he would deeply continue to exert influence in a civilian capacity as the personal advisor to President Kuzon, playing a crucial role in shaping the future of the Philippine military. So the way to think about it, I don't know if I want to explain it here. He's not necessarily in charge of the Philippine military legally, but many would view him to actually be in charge. Just
So
I'll summarize it like that.
it's kind of like officially he's just an advisor, but practically he's the leader anyways.
He's
Something on those lines.
if something were to happen, they're looking at him for guidance. So he is de facto kind of the leading figure. Right now I happen to be writing about the Battle of Shanghai, 1937. Chiang Kai-shek, the Generalissimo, has a bunch of German advisors that are helping him during this time. So Falkenhausen, for example. These figures are so well respected that the Chinese frontline commanders will deter to them often. So while they legally have absolutely no jurisdiction over the Chinese forces, they still have a lot of pull. A lot of Chinese forces will listen to them. Kind of like that. So his relationship with the Philippines, he's very glorified. He's very admired. There's a long-lasting legacy with his family. The Philippine, to my knowledge, the Filipino people, they love him at this point. And then later, Douglas MacArthur's legacy, however, is profoundly affected with a lot of criticism regarding, his tactical acumen, we'll say, and an undiagnosed extreme narcissistic personality disorder. And in my opinion, I think many people would agree he was a narcissist. Let's go through some fun stuff. FDR once called MacArthur the most dangerous man in America. And you can look into that as you would. He was a political rival to FDR, and for good reason. Many observers contend that MacArthur struggled to accept responsibility for his own mistakes. Absolutely true. Frequently evading accountability for any of his actions, in favor of getting promotions. George Marshall said of MacArthur, "You don't have a staff, you have a court." His obsession with maintaining a polished public image was so pronounced that he went as far as to hire an official public relations staff dedicated to enhancing his image with the American public. And my God, they would be working overtime.
It really feels like Napoleon during his Italian campaign and
And
the Egyptian expedition.
yeah, and MacArthur was a prominent reader of Shakespeare, amongst many things, but Napoleon, Caesar, he definitely fits that, so he would know.
When he said Shakespeare, I was just trying to imagine him speaking like an old Shakespeare in English.
Yeah, so I'll say this: people don't know this one. Those around him who spent a lot of time with him said that he, for no reason, would talk in third person all the time, and he loved to talk Shakespearean like. He really fancied himself like a literature guru. So he would try to like force these like legendary quotes out of himself. And anyways, he's a character. Eisenhower would who later becomes the president, articulated the nature of MacArthur's obsession, remarking that he had an obsession, that of a high commander, who must protect his image at all costs and must never admit any of his wrongs. This obsession not only influenced the perception of himself, but it shaped his interactions with others, particularly in high-stakes arenas of, that of military leadership. MacArthur's writing style further reinforced, this grandiose self-image. He often penned grandiose proses, attributing much of the U.S. Army's successes to his own strategic insight and leadership. Another quote I have here, I think this was from Eisenhower, was MacArthur could never see another sun, or even a moon for that matter, in the heavens as long as he was the sun. His narratives highlighted not only his campaigns, but also the numerous awards and accolades that he accumulated throughout his very long career. Some of them definitely earned, some of them not so much, I'd say. He cast himself as a very heroic figure. And, I think if you asked MacArthur, he would have placed himself on the same length of Napoleon, Caesar, Alexander the Great, and stuff. That's how he would have seen himself. And no, just no. A vivid illustration of MacArthur's self-absorption can be found in, what I was saying before about how he'd like to go around in a Japanese kimono, and he liked fancy things. Apparently, I also heard something. This is alleged that he kept like a giant mirror behind his desk so he could look at himself all the time. I mean, he
Okay, I mean,
was
I could just,
very.
like this image is forming in my head. I don't want it to form anymore.
He was meticulous about how he looked and how he dressed. He actually tried to set different fashion standards. So everybody knows that if you drew a picture of MacArthur, corncob pipe. He took this imagery from generals of the Civil War, Ulysses Grant, all that. He thought it really like made him look like an old style general. The hat selection, of course, that's iconic for MacArthur. He knew how to dress to impress
I
people and to
think
have a public image.
I think the best example is when he returns to the Philippines in 1944. That entire staged
Oh
a
yes,
spectacle of him wading through onto the
yeah.
shore, right? As
Still
Arnold Schwarzenegger.
statues in the Philippines. Statues to this day for it. Yes, of course.
I'll be back, and I am back.
Yeah. Oh my god. I mean, you have to hand it to the public relations team. He was raised godlike level, and there was a big problem with that later on. So he certainly cultivated an image, and you gotta think about it. He prioritized his image with the public more so than sometimes military operations, and he had his eyes on the White House. There were a few times he thought about perhaps running on the Republican ticket during World War II against FDR. But that would be thwarted. He actually sent agents. One of his lackeys, Sutherland, he sent them to Washington once to just fish out if the Republican Party would allow him to be nominated. So the Republican Party did polls to see how he would do. And he did well with civilians. But one category that absolutely was adamant about not voting for him were veterans who had served under him. And they had a lot of critique. So the Republican Party did not put him on the ballot because they were afraid of that. Yeah.
I guess vote bank politics is a thing.
Yeah. His inability to acknowledge his failures and his tendency to glorify his contributions and cast shadow over, other people's accomplishments, left historians with a lot to play with when talking about him, to say that much about him. Now, I want to get to the subject at hand, the Philippines. July 26, 1941, Roosevelt took significant steps for the American strategy in the Pacific by federalizing the Philippine Army, and he recalled Douglas MacArthur back to active duty as a 2-star general. He appointed MacArthur as the commander of the U.S. Army forces in the Far East, and on July 31st, 1941, the Philippine Department had about 22,532 troops, of which half were Filipino. The main component consisted of the Philippine Division, a 10,500-man formation that consisted of mostly Philippine scouts under the command of Major General Jonathan Wainwright. Very underrated general who, pardon my French, ate a lot of shit because of MacArthur. Horrible what happened to him during World War II. Absolutely horrible. Tasked with the critical responsibility of defending the Philippines, MacArthur faced 2 primary war plans that would shape his military strategy. So here we have to explain some stuff. War Plan
Just one
Orange.
thing
Yeah.
I want to add. It kind of looks a bit strange, right? Like, he's appointed as a 2-star general at this point officially. That's a
Yeah.
major general, and having command of the entire theater of operations.
Yeah.
It sounds kind of strange, and like he's being undervalued by rank and command, but this is actually what Eisenhower also had when he took over command of European theater of operations for the United
Yes,
States in
exactly.
early 1942.
Mm-hmm.
I just thought that parallel was good.
I apologize for the image I'm putting up. This is kind of the best image I could find that symbolizes what I'm about to talk about, which is War Plan Orange. And okay, we're gonna go through it. So War Plan Orange prioritized. Well, here to explain. For those who didn't see our episode on the Rainbow Plans, the United States had formed during most of the interwar period a bunch of color-coded plans dealing with hypothetical scenarios. So, for example, we did a whole episode on War Plan Red, which was a theoretical war between the United States and Britain, which would see the main point of conflict raging over North America, so Canada. So the United States basically planned to invade Canada to win that. But of all the war plans, the one that seemed the most likely to occur was War Plan Orange. And this was envisioning a war with the Empire of Japan. So, within this war plan, the priority was given to the Philippines garrison. Their primary mission was to defend the entrance to Manila Bay to prevent its use by the Japanese forces. Under this plan, American troops were instructed to concentrate their efforts solely in central Luzon. And I'm actually going to take the time right now to put up a different picture. One sec. Something that actually shows. Okay, so this is the unit placement that will happen in 1941. Kind of gives you an idea, I guess. But basically, War Plan Orange, the American troops were instructed to concentrate their efforts solely in the central part of Luzon. So if you're looking here at this map, this is the big chunk of the big northern island that makes up the Philippines. The initial protective force was, going to be established with the main objective of thwarting enemy landings. Should this initial defense fail, the troops would transition back and engage in delaying actions while withdrawing to the Bataan Peninsula. So if you're looking over here, it's
Yeah,
kind
I
of
would just
shown to
say
the
it's probably the best thing because you don't want an invading amphibious army to gain a foothold.
yeah.
That's pretty much like what why Rommel, for example, with D-Day was pretty adamant of putting the armor closer to the coast.
Exactly. Importantly, this withdrawal strategy was to take place without compromising the primary mission of defending Manila Bay. The Philippine Army was permitted to be utilized for the defense of Manila Bay, but this was understood that not all troops would be allocated to defend the entire archipelago. So, for people who don't know the geography, the Philippines is a bunch of islands, like Panay, Mindoro, Mindanao, and such. And obviously, they wanted to concentrate the American and Filipino forces, put them in Luzon, try to see if they could defend the beaches. Most likely, this will not be possible. And then they were going to find a place to basically make their own battle thermopylae, we'll call it. Where can we bottleneck so that we can fight for the longest period of time and keep the Japanese pinned down? Because the whole idea is the United States is going to somehow make a rescue force, which will take months, if not an entire year, to come over and help them. So they have to defend as long as possible. This strategic withdrawal would necessitate relocating sufficient war supplies to support a force of about 43,000 men for the duration of what they thought would be 6 months. That was their estimation for how long they could survive in Bataan. So I want to kind of get in depth about this. If you're looking at this map, basically the crux of this whole plan is, we're going to get invaded by the Japanese. We are going to fight as close to the beaches as possible and delay them as long as possible so that all the supplies, which probably is already in Bataan, can be moved if anything's left, so that we have everything we need to be in this bottleneck, and then we will try to last as long as possible. What you would not want to do, which is what Mark MacArthur will be doing, is place all the war materials and these units on all of the different islands of the archipelago and try to basically make your entire defensive strategy fight them at the beaches, where you will put the war materials far away from Bataan, making it very difficult when doing delayed fighting. Let's say they get the beaches to get all this to Bataan. So this is a bit foreshadowing. Excuse me. Now, War Plan Orange was overshadowed by, I will call it, the plans that just replaced the color-coded plans, which are known as the Rainbow Plans, specifically Rainbow Plan 5. This emerged after Japan signed the Tripartite Pact in September 1940. Now, despite the fact that War Plan Orange was put aside for Rainbow Plan 5, about 90% of what War Plan Orange was is still the ongoing plan. Rainbow Plan 5 assumed that the United States was allied with Britain and France, and they would be mostly fighting in Europe, perhaps Africa, and they would be adhering to a Europe First strategy. This revised strategic framework stipulated that the United States would adopt a defensive posture against Japan until Germany and Italy would be defeated. This is exactly what happened in World War II. Now, by this time, War Plan Orange 3, which was the last implementation of it, was also deemed a very defensive strategy. So, Rainbow Plan 5, War Plan Orange 3, they're both actually in use. You can think of it this way: War Plan Orange 3 is basically just under Rainbow Plan 5. But MacArthur believed this to be unacceptable. He thought it was far too defeatist, this defensive idea, and he thought that the Philippines should not be lost to an enemy, that they should be, defended at all
I
costs.
It kind of reminds me a lot about these early World War One commanders
Yep.
in terms of their attitude that defensive postures are for cowards and losers.
Yes.
Right? It's that offensive momentum and spirit that is supposed, that aggression that's supposed to win the day.
Yes. Now,
Just, I don't know, maybe it could just be some byproduct of. He did serve in World War One, so that was also there.
he is
Even
a
in
product
general,
of this, yes.
even General Pershing, when the U.S. forces had built up by 1918, he was kind of like pissed off with what he felt was like the defeatist attitudes of like Britain and France. But well, those guys had learned it the really hard way.
Those guys actually knew what was going on, whereas Pershing just comes in guns a-blazing, the Americans in World War One, not realizing, oh, yeah, no, it doesn't work like this. This isn't just a battle in the southern
Machine
border of
guns are
Mexico.
pretty. Machine guns are really a thing,
Yeah.
and actually, funny thing, Douglas Haig, Commander in Chief of Britain, he actually felt machine guns were absolutely useless weapons of war.
Oh, yeah. Famously, yeah. But so Douglas MacArthur has been around forever. War Plan Orange goes back to the Russo-Japanese War. So Theodore Roosevelt was actually not officially the guy who opened this up, but he started the planning that became War Plan Orange. And I think the official War Plan Orange, the first one, came about in 1908, if I'm not mistaken. But this has been around forever. Douglas MacArthur has been part of the planning process. So it's not like he's not aware of how this works, what's the purpose, what's the overall strategic value of all this. So this is going to come to a surprise to everybody that kind of at the last hour before World War II, he's saying, you know what, War Plan Orange 3 is too defeatist. It's excessively defensive. I don't like it. He wanted a more aggressive approach to counter an adversary attempting to conquer the Philippines. Obviously, Japan. It's not like Thailand's going to do it, for example. MacArthur firmly rejected Rainbow Plan 5 on the grounds that it tactically conceded the loss of the Philippines, which it did. The whole point of Rainbow Plan 5 was, delay the Japanese as much as you can, but we're definitely going to lose the Philippines. We're not going to be able to do anything about it. Now, I want to say this to give MacArthur a little credit. MacArthur, in his head, and in most of the American planners' heads, didn't predict Pearl Harbor. They thought that the Pacific Fleet would be probably not capable of facing the Japanese fleet if they're doing a two-front war initially, but after a few months, there's a few aircraft carriers that would be coming in as they were already being commissioned. They would probably be able to form quite a decent force and have a decisive naval battle, they thought, around the Philippines, and after that was done, they would liberate the Philippines. So, in their heads,
Very
it
similar
was
to
feasible.
very similar to what Admiral Yamamoto wanted on the waters.
Exactly. The Americans thought that this would happen probably sometime in 1942. They thought that it was very feasible. MacArthur, amongst many others, did not suspect Japan would attack at the time they did. It has to do with weather and harvesting and all that. It's funny to say. So they kind of misjudged the war. Came a little too early for them. But anyways, given the American Pacific Fleet wasn't destroyed the way it was feasible maybe. But I desist. Almost immediately, as he was being recalled back to active service, he just went to war with War Plan Orange 3, and he kept demanding changes. He wanted to be more aggressive. In 1941, July, Major General Henry Arnold, Hap Arnold, proposed bolstering the capabilities of the Philippine Army Air Corps by sending significant reinforcements, including 4 heavy bombardment groups and 2 pursuit squadrons. by the time hostilities commenced, a total of 107 P-40 Tomahawk fighters and 35 B-17 bombers were going to be stationed in the Philippines, giving MacArthur a crucial amount of air power and advantage for the impending conflict. Now, I have to mention it here because I don't think I put it in my notes. MacArthur made a dramatic change to Rainbow Plan 5. He said, if you gave me heavy bombers, as we see here with the B-17s, my idea, if Japan does declare war on us, is I will preemptively attack significant airfields that Japan has that can threaten the Philippines. This is on Formosa, modern day Taiwan. The whole idea was, as soon as I know that we're at war, I'm going to go bomb the hell out of their airfields, knock out their air capability, thus really reducing what they can do to the Philippines. Not a bad plan.
I mean, makes sense to me, and I think that's fair.
Yeah. Everybody, just before World War II, had very fascinating ideas about how strong air power would be, especially heavy bombers. They kind of saw them as wonder weapons in a lot of ways. So there was this belief that it would be more than enough to knock out the air power. And MacArthur was going to have a lot of submarines under Admiral Thomas Hart. He believed that the submarines would just destroy any invading force while they were amphibiously assaulting the Philippines because they would be very vulnerable. He was not aware, of course, of the impending problem with American torpedoes. They simply didn't work. No one really knew this until the war happened, so it was going to be a rude awakening. So MacArthur had some good ideas, but yeah. He quasi got the green thumb, the green light, green thumb. He got a green light on these ideas, and at the very last minute, they kind of altered Rainbow Plan 5, and they said, okay, MacArthur, your orders are, if we go to war, preemptively attack Formosa, like you said, as fast as you can, hit them as hard as you can, and then initiate War Plan Orange 3, which, as I explained, get all of your materials to Bataan and hold out for as long as possible to see if we can liberate the Philippines. But pretty much everyone realized that's not going to happen. So it's going to be a losing battle, but you need to prolong them as much as possible because of everything else that's going on. MacArthur's aware of these orders. These are his standing orders. So by October the 1st, 1941, Douglas MacArthur successfully persuades the War Department to approve of his innovative concepts. And he starts reporting to Washington things like that he's currently training the Filipinos, and he believes he'll have about 200,000 armed personnel organized into 11 divisions, complete with an Air Force, Corps, Army units, all prepared for combat. He asserts that the B-17s that he wants are going to change the entire picture of the United States posture in the Asia Pacific, dramatically enhancing the Philippines' defensive capabilities. Oh, excuse me. Now, all of his optimistic stuff that he's sending gets some people in Washington to say, okay, maybe he's onto something. We'll go with this. It's pretty risky though. Now his vision is basically a large Filipino force leveraged by his American forces on the ground. The U.S. Navy submarines are going to basically neutralize the Japanese transport vessels. So in his mind, the submarines will hit all the transports, try and unload the troops, and whoever actually gets on the land, his overwhelming force of Filipinos with a small contingent of Americans will destroy them. I want to say that it's been felt by many that MacArthur was not under good judgment because he felt personal great loyalties to the Filipinos and, of course, to his personal friend, President Kuzon. And that's why he went out of his way to change what was standing doctrine for a long time. Because his orders were to, just bunker up in Corregidor and fight it out in Bataan, which would have served the needs of America, but would have abandoned the Filipinos. MacArthur's optimism was buoyed by his belief that Japan was very unlikely to attack in the hot season, which they actually did. He anticipated that they would actually invade in April of 1942, so he trained his forces and he made all of his projections for that time. He thought he had a lot more time than he would. Washington was quite inspired by MacArthur's optimism, and they made slight adjustments to Rainbow Plan 5 to accommodate him by November 19th of 1941. These changes authorized him officially, aircraft in the Far East, to engage any Japanese forces and installations within range of the outbreak of war, so obviously Formosa. Washington bolstered MacArthur's troop numbers and provided him with additional tanks, artillery, and aircraft. They placed some faith in him, placed a lot more resources. So by December 1941, MacArthur commanded 31,095 U.S. troops, supported by 130 undertrained and ill-equipped Filipino soldiers, excuse me, as well as 35 B-17 bombers and 107 P-40 fighters. There was significant shortages in equipment. It was super evident to everyone, particularly in rifles and divisional light artillery. Most troops were armed with World War I era M1917 Enfield rifles, and divisions only had about 20% of the artillery they were supposed to have. Admiral Hart's fleet consisted of 3 cruisers, 13 World War I era destroyers, 6 patrol torpedo boats, and 29 submarines. Washington recognized that the Philippines would struggle to defend against a Japanese invasion, and they instructed Admiral Hart to withdraw his fleet if he came under attack. MacArthur was aware of this, despite what people have written. Despite all the challenges, War Plan Orange 3 was to be implemented at the onset of the invasion. So as soon as the Japanese are looking like they're about to invade the Philippines, the order is get the war materials to Bataan, get the men defensive positions to do delaying attacks, hold up in Bataan. Instead of adhering to his standing orders, MacArthur implemented his own strategy. He dispersed his forces widely and thinly across 9 major Philippine islands, which was incredibly idiotic. This meant that the vital war equipment would be scattered across all of these different units all over the place, making it nearly impossible when being invaded to get all of these pieces of material back to Bataan. MacArthur believed that the Japanese would not attack before April of 1942, so in his head, he was just building up what would be a monolithic defense of the Philippines, and by April of 1942, he thought by then all of the soldiers would be ready and they would be able to hold these positions. Which, even if that happened the way he thought it would, I don't think it would have gone down the way he thought. On November the 27th of 1941, a series of war warnings emerged alongside a growing belief that the war with Japan was imminent. General Marshall sent alerts to all commands, including one directly at MacArthur, instructing him to activate Rainbow Plan 5 if hostilities occurred. Remember, War Plan Orange 3 is part of this, so we'll just call them the same thing at this point. Here's a quote from him. Japanese future action unpredictable, but hostile action possible at any moment. If hostilities cannot be avoided, the United States desires that Japan commit the first overt act. It's crucial, this part.
Propaganda, right? You don't want to be the aggressor.
Yeah. This policy should not be construed as restricting you to a course of action that might jeopardize your defense. Should hostilities occur, you will carry out the tasks assigned in Rainbow Plan 5, so far as they pertain to Japan. Again, War Plan Orange 3 is in Rainbow Plan 5, so just think of them as the same thing. Now, Rainbow Plan 5 called for MacArthur to conduct air raids against enemy forces and installations within tactical operating range as soon as Japan committed the first act of aggression. This meant hitting Formosa.
Psst. Hey you ever hear me talk about some great Pacific War movie or documentary like Pearl Harbor Minute by Minute over on Netflix and feel the urge to watch it for yourself?
Uh-oh, you live in Japan and your Netflix doesn't have it? Must suck to be you.
Sucks to be me right now.
Oh wow, season 4 of Demon Slayer is out. Oh wait, I can't watch it on Canadian Netflix, but it's over on Japan Netflix? Whatever will I do?
Oh no.
Being blocked from regional content? With private internet access, you too can watch Demon Slayer Season 4 by switching your IP address to Japan.
Yes! Hell yeah!
Why stop with Japan? With private internet access, you can change your IP address to over 84 different countries and every single US state, giving you access to region-restricted content all over the world.
Nice.
Many websites and services like Netflix are only accessible depending on your physical location, but private internet access helps you overcome these restrictions. Think about it. Without private internet access, it's like paying for a TV series and missing out on the latest season. Shots fired, Demon Slayer on Canadian Netflix.
Is that like a personal attack or something?
Ever fear people are gonna find your Google searches?
Banzai! Banzai! Banzai!
FBI, open up!
Private internet access makes sure that those Google searches remain a buried secret, as private internet access encrypts your internet access and has a no logs policy. Think you're safe with the local coffee shop's free Wi-Fi? No, you are certainly not. Private internet access gives you more privacy features than any other software and real-time protection from malware and trackers, giving you peace of mind knowing those Google searches remain seen by you and you alone. Private internet access has a no-log policy that they've defended in court, which means they are not storing any of your browsing data. Hey, are you like me using different devices under one household? Private internet access is available on all platforms and protects an unlimited amount of devices at the same time. I personally use private internet access to unblock movies and TV series from all across the globe, and I sleep easier writing scripts for my YouTube channel and others knowing my data is secure. Look, this is a no-brainer. Sign up with my link in the description of this video to get 83% off, plus 4 months for free, so it ends up being only around $2 per month. Signing up for private internet access is risk-free. There's a 30-day money-back guarantee, and 24/7 customer support is available. So don't forget to click www.piavpn.com/the Pacific War Channel, and a big thanks to Private Internet Access for sponsoring this video.
Sorry, I'm getting over a really bad cold. I keep coughing. I will try to mute myself as much as possible. Although I think there's an AI function now in Riverside, the software we're using, that will take out my coughs. So it'll be interesting to see if that works. Nevertheless,
Good
MacArthur.
time to experiment. I'll just...
Yeah. Well, people won't know this, but as we are talking right now, I can hear cars in the background of Garab's mic, but no one in the audience will hear this because the AI takes them out really well. And probably my birds screaming from the living room.
Oh, that I definitely hear now. Never had that with Zoom.
Nevertheless, MacArthur continued to focus on his beach offensive plan, relying on the forces he thought he'd have in April of 1942. Now, what we're going to get into here, and we're getting close to the end of the episode, but I don't want to dabble too much into the invasion because the next episode will be strictly the invasion, what happens. But I wanted to talk about the Clarkfield disaster. Within minutes of the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor at 2:30 a.m. on December the 8th, 1941, this is Manila time because remember the different time zones, headquarters in the Philippines received the news. And MacArthur was informed at about 3 a.m. with the news. Sorry. Lieutenant Colonel Richard Sutherland, MacArthur's chief of staff, relayed the information to Brereton, the leader of their air forces, at 4 a.m., prompting him to immediately place the Air Force on war alert. At 5 a.m., Brereton sought MacArthur's permission to bomb Formosa. So, we're looking at a 2-hour delay already, but you have to get the aircraft ready and such, so Brereton's doing his job. He wants to bomb Formosa, which is part of Rainbow Plan 5. But he is denied access to MacArthur by Sutherland. Instead, Sutherland insists on conducting a preliminary photo reconnaissance mission to assess potential targets in Formosa before any bombing can take place. Very strange. They would already have intelligence on this. At 5:30 a.m., MacArthur received a cable from Washington instructing him to execute Rainbow Plan 5 without delay. However, it appears that MacArthur took no immediate action. Rainbow 5 amendment called for MacArthur to conduct air raids, like I said, against enemy forces installations within their tactile operating radius, so Formosa.
And this was also something he said that he thought would be important, like bombing Formosa's airfields.
Ironically, yeah, it's part of his plan. At 6:15 a.m., Admiral Hart informed MacArthur that Japanese carriers had just bombed the American seaplane tender William B. Preston in Davao Bay on Mindanao. So, not only has there been an attack on Pearl Harbor, but there's been an attack in the Philippines against a U.S. vessel. Brereton again requests permission to bomb Formosa at 7:15 a.m. Sutherland replied, MacArthur said no. We must not make the first overt act. Your role is defensive for the time being. Very strange.
I guess I can also just sympathize with them on that because Pearl Harbor would have just happened a few hours ago. Confusion is going to be reigning. It would take a little bit of time for, that dust to clear out so that he could at least see a bit better of what's going on.
You could give him that credit, but the Japanese had already attacked vessels within the Philippines. That changes things, I think, significantly. By
All
8
right,
a.m.,
okay, I get fair enough.
yeah, by 8 a.m., Hap Arnold called Brereton personally from Washington, urging him to make sure his planes were not attacked on the ground because of basically
Yeah,
what happened at Pearl
Pearl
Harbor.
Harbor. Yeah, I
Yeah.
was about to say. The funny
By
thing
8
is, because the
yeah.
US believed it was going to be saboteurs, they had lined up the aircraft in like rows on the airfield. And the
Yeah,
Zero pilots are like, oh, free targets.
exactly. By 8:30 a.m., Brereton had begun ordering his aircraft to circle the airfields, so they're up in the air, going around. Not actually good, given what happens. At 9:25 a.m., Brereton learned that the Japanese bombers had just struck Tagero Field, with the United States Army Air Force's summer headquarters being there in Baguio. He called Sutherland to request permission to bomb Formosa because they were being attacked, but Sutherland denied the request again. At 9:40 a.m., Brereton received orders to perform a photo reconnaissance flight over Formosa, while the understanding was that if targets were identified, a bombing raid could be authorized in the afternoon.
So they're already 5 hours behind from Brereton's first request.
Yeah. Finally, at 10:14 a.m., MacArthur approved the bombing attack on Formosa. Excuse me. God, I'm coughing out a lung. By 10:30 a.m., aircraft began landing to refuel because they had been circling because they thought they'd be about to be attacked. And at 10:45 a.m., the B-17s were ordered to be armed with bombs in preparation for an attack raid that would be set for 2 p.m. to attack Formosa. At 2 p.m. at this point. A lot has happened by then. So, at 12:35 p.m., 26 Nells and 27 Bettys bombed Clark Field, escorted by 34 Zero fighters that would strafe the aircraft on the ground. About 7 minutes later, 53 Bettys attacked Iba Field with 51 Zero fighters strafing the ground targets. You actually want to pull up a new map. One sec. Trying to see what the best map would be for this. This shows the excuse me, this shows the invasion. God, I'm not sure if I actually have a great map for this one. It's like perhaps this one. It's maybe a little bit hard to see. I'll zoom in. But you can see here some of the various locations.
That's quite a detailed map.
It's very detailed. So yeah, the aircraft are being strafed on the ground. They're being bombed. 7 minutes later, 53 Bettys attacked Iba Field with 51 Zero fighters strafing the ground targets as well. Most of Brereton's aircraft at Clark Field Air Base were on the airstrips when they came under attack. Of the 17 B-17 stationed there, 12 were destroyed and 4 were heavily damaged. Additionally, 34 P-40s were lost on the ground or in aerial combat. The initial 45-minute attack resulted in the destruction of half of the Far East Air Force's aircraft on the ground. Over the following week, ongoing Japanese air assaults further diminished Brereton's remaining aircraft, leaving them with only a few P-40s and a few B-17s. From December the 17th to December the 20th, recognizing the insufficient number of fighters to protect the B-17s, MacArthur ordered the remaining 14 B-17s to return to Australia. Excuse me. I really do apologize. I am coughing out a lung. So, the air forces have been basically obliterated. There was no formal investigation as to why this happened at the airfields. Many historians argue that MacArthur's long-standing friendship with President Kuzon spanning more than 40 years, significantly shaped the circumstances leading up to the disaster. Excuse me. During a visit to Tokyo in 1938, Japanese officials had assured President Kuzon that Japan had no aggressive intentions towards the Philippines.
Of course.
Yep. And that they were primarily interested in trade. As the Philippines moved closer to independence at that time, Kuzon, he probably naively believed that his country would be spared an invasion. This is something that he would have told MacArthur. Additionally, the Philippines had not been included in Japan, sorry. Additionally, the Philippines had been included in Japan's Greater East Asia Co-Prosperity Sphere. Without its consent, they actually just forced it on them, which is kind of funny. So Kuzon, he had a reason to believe that Japan just wanted him to be part of the team.
Okay, sorry. They put him in an alliance, or you could call it like a bloc. I guess that would be maybe the proper term.
Yeah.
Without really asking for the country's consent. And you feel optimistic for peace.
Exactly.
I don't know, you feel like, okay, what's going on?
Going future for more evidence here, in 1962, MacArthur wrote to historians Paul Burtness and Warren Ober this quote: "It was hoped that the Japanese would not attempt an invasion of the Philippines in view of its approaching independent status." Just to indicate that MacArthur was at least under the belief that this was the situation, or at least he was trying to adhere to the wishes of the president of the Philippines. He wanted to prevent the loss of thousands of Filipino lives, absolutely, and extensive destruction, that the war would entail. Obviously, Kuzon doesn't want his country to be invaded by the Japanese. Kuzon recognized that if the United States initiated a bombing mission against, let's say, Formosa, this would heighten the chances Japan would not leave the Philippines alone. So, while all of that tussle was going on about whether they should be bombing Formosa or not, you have to keep it in your mind that the president of the Philippines, who is the rightful ruler of their military forces, it's not MacArthur technically, I mean, he's in charge of the American forces, of course, but not the Filipino forces by any measure. The president is telling him probably every single moment, please don't do this, please don't do this. They're going to hit us if you do. And, MacArthur adhered to it, I think. That would be my judgment. And I think he was quite naive. And he wanted Japan to, actually invade before he started anything. Fortunately. And as we know, the Japanese would be invading. So I don't want to go too deeply into it, but we will talk about the initial invasion just to look through what happened with War Plan Orange. On December the 8th of 1941, the 14th Army of Japan, led by Lieutenant General Homa Masaharu, began landing on Bataan Island, not to be confused with Bataan itself, located on the northeastern coast of Luzon. So they were already invading islands. 2 days later, additional landings occurred in the Camiguin Island, as well as Vigan, Apari, Gonzaga. By December the 12th, the Japanese had landed 2,500 troops from the 16th Division at Legazpi in southern Luzon. On that same day, MacArthur should have already implemented, War Plan Orange 3 to initiate the defensive withdrawal to the Bataan Peninsula, as, this would have allowed his forces as much time as possible to relocate the essential war materials, like food, medical supplies, equipment. But he did not follow this directive. Instead, he pursued the same strategy we've been talking about. Overestimating the capabilities of his Philippine forces, MacArthur chose to fight an offensive war at the beaches, despite the complete loss of his air forces. He was now relying solely upon Hart's Navy, that being mostly submarines, to target Japan's transport vessels. Consequently, the supplies intended for Bataan under War Plan Orange 3 were distributed to the forces across the entire archipelago, rather than being consolidated in Luzon. So, meanwhile, Hart withdrew most of his fleet from the Philippine waters at the onset, because that was his orders. MacArthur knew those orders, leaving only his submarines in accordance with Rainbow Plan 5. These submarines proved ineffective at disrupting the Japanese transports, much to MacArthur's dismay, leading him to ask Admiral Hart, what in the world is wrong with your submarines? I don't even think Hart would know at that point. The submarines were armed.
the torpedoes, which would not be rectified for a couple of years.
Yeah, the Mark 14 torpedoes notoriously malfunctioning for various reasons. The United States Navy would basically not think about this problem for the first half of the war and only fix it in 43. So these torpedoes were doing nothing. Now, another thing that MacArthur does is rather than deploying his best troops, his elite troops, the Philippine Scouts, the 4th Marines, or the 31st Infantry, he sends the Filipino Army to the beaches. So these are undertrained, under-equipped guys, a lot of them quite young. And he just gives them orders with, hold the beaches at all cost. He kept about a third of his combat-trained regiments safely out of harm's way on Corregidor Island. Consequently, only 1 battalion out of 3 was able to even engage the Japanese before ultimately surrendering, largely due to poor layouts of their defenses. MacArthur's confidence in the Filipino troops diminished as the Japanese rapidly advanced following their landings at Ligayan Gulf on December the 21st. By nightfall on the 23rd, they had marched 10 miles into the interior. On the 24th, 7,000 men from the 16th Imperial Japanese Army Division landed at 3 points along the shore of Lamont Bay, encountering General Parker's forces, who were dispersed like the rest, and they lacked artillery. So the Japanese consolidated their positions, and they advanced on Manila. And yes, this is all going to be covered in future episodes. For the purpose of this episode, which isn't really to talk about the invasion, it's to talk about why things screwed up in the background. General Wainwright and his poorly trained, ill-equipped 11th and 71st Philippine divisions were unable to repel or even pin down the Japanese forces at the beaches, of course. If they had better trained troops equipped, such as any of the other elite divisions who should have been there, they might have been able to. But instead, his Wainwright's best group was the 26th Philippine Scout Cavalry. They moved to try and confront the Japanese at Rosario, and they do an admirable job. Actually, is it the last time? I don't think it's the last time in World War II history that there's a cavalry charge, technically, but I think in the Pacific War it is. Heavy casualties around Rosario. On the 24th, MacArthur finally invokes War Plan Orange 3, and he withdraws the Philippine government and his personal headquarters to the heavily fortified island of Corregidor, and he orders a general retreat of all the troops on Luzon to the Bataan Peninsula. So what should have been done on the 8th was done on the 24th. Most of the troops in Luzon managed to retreat, but they could not get most of their supplies. As you can imagine, they're literally fighting for their lives. Much is abandoned. Additionally, the U.S. and Philippine armies are scattered across all of the other islands, the archipelago, and there's no way that they can get their equipment to Bataan, let alone themselves. There is an enormous loss of the U.S. Army Air Forces in the region, and the U.S. Armies, the U.S. Navy, their submarines completely fail to stop any of these forces at the beaches, so it's a colossal failure. So MacArthur kind of just panicked and resorted to what his standing orders were in the first place. He didn't give any sufficient time to gather, the food, the water, the medical supplies, the weaponry, and such. And they had planned under War Plan Orange 3 to have about 43,000 men locked up in Bataan for about 6 months of battle, but they only stockpiled enough provisions to survive about 30 days of a siege. Ultimately, the forces would succumb to disease, starvation, and a very bitter surrender. The loss, the Bataan Death March, for example. I think a lot of people are familiar with that. Now, is MacArthur responsible for the loss of the Philippines? No, by no means. This was an inevitability, but he dramatically screwed this up. This is kind of unforgivable, to be honest. This would have cost the Japanese a lot more time, a lot more prestige, and as we know, the timetable for Japan gets accelerated because of certain things.
I think, and if I'm not mistaken, for all their offensives in Asia that launched after Pearl Harbor, I think they had 12 divisions earmarked in total. This is including
11,
invasions
yeah.
of Hong Kong.
Yeah.
Sorry, 11. Hong Kong, Borneo, Malaysia, Singapore, the Dutch East Indies, which is the primary target of the entire offensive.
And that concludes this episode. The next episode will actually be looking at how the invasion occurred. It'll be done in different stages. The withdrawal to Bataan, the battle for Bataan, the battle for Corregidor. I haven't mapped it all out yet as to how many episodes, but I want to condense this as much as possible because it could be a very long one. Looking at how long the Malayan campaign was, But
Sure.
another thing to consider, MacArthur, and these are alleged things, by the way. MacArthur's he's going to be given orders to leave the Philippines. Before he leaves the Philippines, actually before Manila is taken by the Japanese, he this is alleged information. Apparently, he bought stocks in mining companies in the Philippines. And I can't remember the names of the individuals, but I believe it was the mayor of Manila. I forget his name. Is Roxas or something? Roxas. He, I think, bought this on behalf of MacArthur. And these were, I think, silver mines or something in the Philippines. And he bought this knowing what was going to happen during the war. And the value would change, to say the least, after the Philippines was liberated from the Japanese. And he personally made a pretty penny from this. Not to mention, he would also receive a gift from Manuel, the president of the Philippines, of $500,000, I believe. And it's not illegal to receive this gift, but it was deeply frowned upon. And others would have been given this. They might have declined it if they're more professional, but MacArthur did not decline it. So he actually made a lot of money before leaving the Philippines. It's just something else I always like to bring up. But yeah. As far as this episode's concerned, that will end it for now. This episode has been more or less just looking at the failure of War Plan Orange 3 under MacArthur, MacArthur's quirky bio and such. I just want to say before we leave, if you'd like to further support the channel, please consider checking out our YouTube membership or our Patreon account at www.patreon.com/thepacificwarchannel. By joining either, you get access to the exclusive podcast series, early access to all the content I make, and voting rights to the subjects I will tackle next. And please go on the YouTube and comment things that you want to hear about. I've been receiving a lot of comments from a video that's gone viral as of 2 weeks ago, and it's forcing my hand to make some episodes I may have not wanted to make. I'll say that much. I can't believe how many
I've seen the
guys
poll.
like
I've
Kantai
seen the poll.
Collection.
I've seen the poll.
To all the Kantai Collection guys out there, I was making jokes. I don't necessarily seethe at the mouth or froth at the mouth hating anime ship girls. I received 200 comments just being like, dude, leave Kantai Collection alone. Like, it's incredible. So I'm gonna have to make an episode kind of like, I'll probably be drunk doing it too. I'm probably gonna be drinking while I look into that world. It's sick and twisted. But yeah, until next time, over and out.